Good morning, everybody. Eddie Webb. We are here at the new Media Lab at Mesa Community College. Today, we have a very special guest, Brad Kendrex, who holds the Office of Executive Vice President of Finance and Operations for both Chandler Gilbert Community College as well as Mesa Community College. He has a credible background in a MPA and a CGFM, credentials and degrees. Brad came on board to help Mesa out a few years back, and I've got to work with Brad and get to know him, and we're very, very fortunate to have you. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thanks for the kind words, Eddie, and thanks for the invitation. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah. So one of the practices that we do for our podcast is we have a small team of faculty and staff that prepare questions for our guests. Brad has more questions than any guest that we've ever had in all of our podcasts, which is amazing. And I mean, really good questions. And again, we don't practice gotcha kind of journalism here. Our show is intended to be meaningful and to provide our community with good information firsthand. So again, thank you, sir. So, hey, let's talk about COVID enrollment between the two colleges, Chandler and Mesa. Could you tell us a little about the numbers and maybe the strategies of enrollment?
So unfortunately, I don't have those off the top of my head in terms of where they are, but I think the last time I reviewed the numbers across the district, everybody was down, or all of the colleges were down fairly substantially from last fall. And if you recall, last fall, we were down fairly substantially from where we had been in a previous year. So we're still in the early part of the semester for some of the schools. So Chandler in particular, it's hard to say where they're going to be at because dual enrollment is still kind of working through its normal process. So it'll probably be another, handful of weeks before we'll have those numbers. But at this point, even if it's 10 to 15% down, that's on top of being 10 to 15% down last year, which is fairly significant. So we're definitely feeling a different reality on the ground, and that also feels different based on how we're handling our enrollment. So as you mentioned, MCC is at about 30 something percent in person, which is still a fairly light touch on campus. Chandler's a little heavier in terms of the hybrid and on-campus environment, but definitely quieter in both spaces.
Yeah. As you were talking about that, I'm wondering, because COVID, as tragic as it has been, has pushed people in ways that probably would have been may have taken another 5 years to get people to really invest in technology in the learning environments. And I'm wondering, as you're talking, I wonder if it's also impacted the way the district funds the college, because for so long, we had this footsie model. We have this footsie model based on, and all of that happens downtown at the legislation level. But we nonetheless, we still get these tax dollars from property taxes and new build and all of that. We have our own way of funding ourselves from the tax point of view, and then that money being allocated to colleges based on footsie, which I've always thought was a terrible way to run a business, which we are, because we need to fund the programs, so that we can, everybody can experience the best college that we can possibly have, regardless if this semester there's 10 people, or next semester there's 8 people, or, just simple numbers here. But you know what I mean? Like, we need to be consistent, as or even allocate budgets more to 3 to 5 years than semester to semester. Has there been any change on that front?
So there hasn't been a settled change yet. So we've been having conversations for a very long time in administrative circles about how to structure it in a way that feels a little bit more productive. And really that conversation started maybe 10 years ago when the colleges started experiencing downward enrollment that's been experienced for a little while. And MCC had several years where, just enrollment was not up at the high levels that it was at in the early 2000s. So over the course of that time, we've been talking about ways that are more productive, that don't feel like colleges are hamstrung when it just so happens that not as many students come each year. The thing that we have to think about is that there's always the balance between how we want to think about spending and building the infrastructure of a college versus the way that our revenue comes in. So our revenue historically comes from the state of Arizona, which is not really a thing right now, and from property taxes and from tuition. And in the past, tuition was a lot bigger piece of the pie. So if we had enrollment declines, that means that there were fewer students paying tuition, which means there were fewer dollars for everyone. So the easiest way to distribute money was you got a portion of the money that was paid in tuition for your school and a portion of the property taxes. Now property taxes represent 70% of the money that we're bringing in. So when we have enrollment declines, it still impacts the amount of money we get, though not to the same degree that it did before. So we're always trying to find a balance, whether it be at the district level or at the college level, of how we resource for what we want to be and the students we anticipate having versus responding to the moment. So COVID is a great example where we're experiencing something right now that is severe, but I don't think anyone thinks that we're going to stay at this level forever. So the question is, how do we balance where we think we're going to be in a couple of years versus where we are at this particular moment when it comes to funding?
So kind of like a 70-30 split in a way. Yeah. Sounds good. Public education. I mean, it's enough to make sure that, we're a place of destination for students, to get them in the programs and classes, that we are attractive to students. 30% is that's fair. I mean, I think for a public education, that what we offer at the price point that we offer our education as well, I think is amazing. That's offset by, I think, the tax. All of us that pay taxes on property and stuff should feel good about the job you all are doing with our money. What's it like to lead two different campuses?
Yeah, no, that's a good question, and it's definitely a challenge. I mean, to my knowledge, I don't think anyone else has done a role like this, so this whole thing is a bit of a grand experiment. So I would be not being honest if I said it wasn't a little bit chaotic some of the time, especially on the front end, getting used to, managing a normal sort of workload plus becoming acquainted with MCC. So I'd say that MCC was an extremely gracious college to work with, has been a very gracious college to work with. And I was, I was expecting something a little bit different coming in what was supposed to be a very temporary help out kind of role, but found folks that were very willing to work and very interested in thinking about things differently and trying new things. So it's actually been, I think, a lot easier than it could have been. But there's pluses and minuses. I mean, there's a lot of places, and I think when you have 4 campuses in the East Valley that are as complex as the ones that I'm working with, you feel like you're never in all of the places that you could be and, helping in all of the ways that you can. But at the same time, there's also a certain amount of efficiency that comes with being able to hear lots of the same issues from different ways. So I think one of the benefits of having been able to stick around MCC for this period of time is trying to really find some of the better things that Chandler does and sharing those with MCC in ways that we can internalize and make work for this community. And similarly, stealing the good stuff from MCC and using that to inspire at Chandler. So it is a little bit different. And sometimes it's a 2-step of kind of going backwards and forwards with the same issues over and over again. But it has been rewarding, the opportunity to get some colleges to line up together and cooperate on issues, especially 2 colleges that have a little bit of a rivalrous history.
That's a really excellent perspective too. I mean, it opens the doors to a lot of different things. Like maybe we should have more of that, more people having experiences across all 10 campuses to strengthen us, instead of silos and too much bureaucracy, too much top end stuff. And, maybe people can't. I mean, I think isn't that kind of like the provost concept, right? That a provost will overlook, multiple campuses.
Yeah, and I think the district office has a certain amount of that type of role where it's about bringing people together, but the scope and scale of Maricopa is so broad that often the details kind of get lost when you step that far away from 10 separate campuses. So I think the benefit is in a system of this size is that we actually are pretty good about sharing people and moving people within our system. So we have a lot of folks working here at MCC that have worked other places also and come with that perspective. I think the difference with me doing both at the same time is that rather than moving from one college to the other and kind of getting used to the way that it's done at that college, there's a little bit more of the melding of what the ways of those colleges are so that we're not as different.
Yeah. Well, I know Glassberg was trying to create this concept of one Maricopa, and in many ways, it felt really good that we have a one Maricopa from the student perspective. I was thinking in terms of where to enroll and financial aid, that any one of the 10 colleges could, even if a person, was going to Mesa or maybe they worked in Chandler. And so on the way home, they wanted to take a class over there instead of Mesa, that they could enroll in both colleges. And, that always made sense to me. And then the other side of that was presidents wanting their own identity of their own colleges and, who's teaching what and where. And so I always thought the one Maricopa from the student perspective was a really healthy choice to make in terms of access and, just the getting enrolled and all of that sort of stuff. It made sense. But it also makes sense that each college wants to sort of have their own identity as well, their expertise, and they're known for a particular certain, colleges within their college, I guess departments we call them. If you're at a university, you call them colleges. But yeah, so HR, you get to play with HR. That must be daunting in many, many, many ways. One of the questions we have here out of the HR category is any comments on the future of remote work at Mesa? Do you see that full-time faculty that were face-to-face might remain online, or are you guys having any talks about what that looks like in the future?
No, absolutely. And I think it's going to be more of a both and kind of scenario. So we went from a world where everybody was on campus all of the time because that's who we are and that's what we understood, to a place where everyone was forced to be not on campus, or most people were forced to be not on campus most of that time. So we're in a place now where we're saying there were good parts of both of those. And a lot of the conversation at the moment is remembering who we were before the pandemic and trying to get back to that, kind of to your earlier point about the new media lab. Like, what is this without students engaging? Now, there are other ways, there are other, places to get those students engaged, and maybe ways that we weren't doing it before, that by doing it now, we've opened up a new audience. So we don't want to lose the good parts of the new way of thinking, the new technology, the new flexibility, but we also don't want to give up who we are and what our students have historically come to us to get. So that's where the conversation is right now. We've continued to engage in district circles because whatever we do, we need to do it fairly consistently. Yeah. And to that end, the district office has rolled out some remote work policies that are meant to be permanent. They're meant to be a world after pandemic kind of remote work where we have more flexibility. So there are some pieces of that where we are pushing the envelope and saying maybe there's some different ways to employ people that give us something that we haven't had before. But for the vast majority of people, it's saying, let's look at the work that you and your department do, and let's find ways to give you some balance if that's appropriate to the work. Let's find ways to continue to serve students in alternate ways and to add more capabilities. But we still need to make sure that we're holding down the fort in terms of keeping the college staffed and keeping all of the services that students expect here to be here.
It's exciting to know about that table and sit around it. That must just be really challenging and rewarding and all of that stuff to engage in that level of management. one of the things that I did in the spring is all of my students did research projects on that very topic. What is COVID? How has COVID changed instruction? What's how do you feel about online, face to face? We had amazing, amazing projects. Probably going to share some of those soon because I think from the student perspective, obviously that's important. And I know distant learning has always been a part of our higher ed programs, making education accessible. So, yeah, great to hear. How do people have access to those conversations? Are those like strategic? Are those recorded? Speaking of,
Yeah, so we've done a couple of, in the college-wide forums, we've talked about some of these themes, I think, over the last couple of months, and there's been some emails on the topics, but really the conversation about having it be a possibility, that's, where I was engaged, and that's kind of done. So the phase that we are at now is operationalizing this. So we're now in a place where we're trying to work with our directors, our managers, our faculty chairs to get their thinking to continue to develop around what it is that we're going to do in each of these departments that balances all of these conflicting needs. So it's a really great opportunity to do something that we haven't done before and to, take advantage of some additional flexibility, but we have to be intentional about it. And that's a whole new layer of things that folks need to think about in order to create those opportunities in their departments and find ways that each team can work best.
yeah, and give faculty and folks time to reinvent themselves. I think that's important too. Even though it was a big crunch, I don't know how we did it, but we got everybody online. We got everybody credentialed through the CTL about how to teach online. Introduce Canvas as which in the old days was sort of against a school couldn't really make a teacher use a textbook or a particular software, but in this instance, it was like going to use Canvas, and people are using Canvas. I love Canvas. It wasn't a problem for me. I love Canvas, but that's a big undertaking, and it went really well. It went so well, people don't, coming back is now a whole thing, right?
Exactly. I think it's inertia,
Yeah.
wherever we are. And, the situation created a lot of progress up front, and it wasn't always pretty, but we're now in a place where we can decide what to keep and what to toss out.
Yeah, that's good. That's good stuff. I like this question. I like underlying assumptions about spending next year, fall. Anything driving that?
So we're in the middle of all of that, and obviously there's a lot of thinking that goes on. Like I said earlier, we have an idea of where we are for the fall, but it's going to be less predictable than usual. So coming before the pandemic, we had a really solid understanding of what we typically do in terms of enrollment, and it was a combination of kind of what the population of the nearby area looks like and what our emerging programs are and what our high school populations look like. I mean, sometimes there's just fewer seniors graduating high school, and that means we're going to have fewer students come through. All of those trends were blown up by the pandemic. So we're in a place now where we know that our enrollment is low, and therefore we know our revenues will be lower. So we have to be cautious.
Right.
The question, though, is what comes next. And the approach that we have taken throughout is to give ourselves as much flexibility as possible, because we don't want to react in a knee-jerk way that undercuts the college's ability to serve those students if it turns out that they come back in the spring or in next fall. So we're trying to create lots of flexibility. We're trying not to overcommit ourselves, knowing that we're in a place where we're functioning as a smaller college than we have historically been. But we're trying to maintain all that infrastructure. So a lot of what my team and I do is helping to find ways to enable as much of this as possible, as flexibly as possible, and to seed good conversations among the management of each of our groups to think about what our priorities are, what our options are, how we can go through the next couple of years, still offering much of the same things, just to, a smaller footprint or in different ways, but keep our door open to building back in a clearer, better way when this inevitably turns around to some degree.
And it will. And we always want to make Mesa, we want to make all of the Maricopa colleges a place of destination for students, like a place they really want to go. One of our advantages is our low tuition, right? But also our high quality of education that a student receives here. We always, want to balance that because even when I did my dissertation on the new media lab, one of the things that I found was there was really not much competition in the area of modernizing the language arts in the way that we're trying to do here. And now ASU has started a whole digital program downtown. So ASU is doing great stuff in terms of this, and they're actually coming over to visit the lab in the next week or so. They want to see what we're doing because my perspective was modernizing, language, the language arts, in terms of just instead of just writing, short narrative papers, is actually doing serious research documentary. Went down to the U of A. I presented all this work and they're up and running, you know?
Right.
So now it's like, it took me a minute, it's like, no, that's ours. And then so many people have told me, yeah, life doesn't work like that, man. And, for us, they're interested in us because, we're a pipeline, if we partner, like we get students interested in this type of work, they have a place to go after here. And that is exciting for the state, I like to think grandiose like that for our listeners, like we're really contributing to our state. I think we are.
I think all of this is win-win,
Yeah.
where, we have good ideas, and that's kind of the benefit of higher education, where in some elements we are a little bit competitive with each other, but in the end, it's all one big pipeline and getting our students where they need to go. And if you're creating something that is practical and useful and, applied to their future careers, then we're doing the good work.
Agreed. So our next question here is what kind of flexibility does the college have in terms of your budgets to fund, I'm going to say innovation, right? I'm going to say faculty, like at a university, that's what you get paid for. You get paid to do research and invent things and create things and innovate things. And, at a community college, it's sort of still, English, math, read, these core type STEM, competencies that we have. But is there funds for faculty to explore, take some risk about how to change education? Do we have a fund like that?
So I think there's a couple of ways to answer that question. And the answer is yes. There's a lot of opportunities. When we think about opportunities for innovation and new things, really it comes down to how do we plant those seeds? How do we take opportunities to start something, to assess it, and to decide whether or not to scale? A college of this size always has some level of flexibility that comes up during the year. So we don't, as we're currently structured, have big contingencies set aside for discretionary spending. That's something that MCC has unfortunately kind of whittled down over the course of the last decade, dealing with other enrollment declines and budget pressures. So that's something that we're aspiring to build back up again, is to find ways to streamline around the departments of the college in order to sort of create a little bit of a pool for discretionary spending during the year. Now, saying that doesn't mean that there isn't capacity in the college to make those decisions. So we do everything we can as early as possible to identify where we realistically think that there will be money available that isn't fully spent on its original purpose, so that we have the ability to make some of that available for innovation, for new ideas, for emergent things that come up. But beyond just managing the college's funds themselves, we really have an unprecedented opportunity right now with federal coronavirus aid. So that came in a package that was really with unfortunate circumstances. And really the federal funding that we got from the original CARES Act was focused on us responding to the immediate impact of coronavirus on how we teach. But since then, there have been 2 additional packages, and really significant amounts of funding have come in to higher education across the country to think about all of these things. So that's a space where we do have ample resources right now. Now we're using some of those resources to cover the costs of coronavirus and navigating the pandemic. We're using some of that money to help float the college, even though our enrollment is down. We are putting a significant amount of money together as a system to make big improvements to systems like the student information system and others to hopefully create clearer pathways and better tools for our students. So there's a lot of good kind of big picture work, but there's also a lot of opportunities for folks that have good ideas, specifically good ideas that relate to how we are doing teaching and learning in this environment. So things about hybrid learning and best practices and enhanced student interventions to help keep students on their pathway. Those are all things that we have some opportunity over the next 18 months or so to spend some money on and evaluate when those good ideas come along.
That's great. And I think you all can get a hold of Dr. Chris Bliss, who's managing the HERFA money.
Absolutely.
And she's doing all kinds of wonderful, along with Dr. Megan Garvey and the CTL, who's running some pretty significant grants for us. Yeah, I also learned sometimes grant money, it's a good thing, and it also can create problems long term, like how to stabilize those programs after the money's gone, right?
That's exactly where, the HERF conversation comes in, is that every time we have one of these ideas, we need to be extremely clear about what we're going to try and why we're trying it, but then there needs to be a backup plan, because some of these things may be good to lobby and to build into how we do business, but some of them will have a natural end. So, we'll take the opportunity for what it's worth and see where we can take something on now that will pay dividends, even if we don't continue funding it a couple of years out.
What an exciting job you have, man. It just sounds really exciting.
Multifaceted for sure.
I love puzzles. I love putting puzzles together. So our next question is a HR practice question in relationship to our adjunct faculty. Adjuncts only get access to systems, including Canvas, a few days before classes start. This runs counter to our stated goals to have a high-quality course design in our learning management system, as our part-time faculty are scrambling to get ready. Can you speak to this situation and maybe other HR processes that can work against our goals of serving students?
So, this is a good question, and it's not a new one. These are things that we wrestle with all of the time. And part of the perspective is that we have to remember that while any form of kind of process and bureaucracy naturally slows down what you're trying to do on the front lines, there's a reason that all these processes exist as well. So sometimes they can be improved in order to make them flow a little better and to get better results. And that's what we're always striving for. But we also do need to have these things to keep us legal, to ensure that we're looking out for new employees and so forth. So this is one where there are points of friction along the way the systems work with each other in terms of setting someone up and getting them authorized to work in HCM, and how that feeds into our workflows for setting up IT and building an identity. Candidly, a lot of that exists at the district level, so we continue to work on ways to get ahead of it. But part of it is also the unfortunate and natural byproduct of like our business model, where we make a lot of staffing and class offering decisions very close to the beginning of the semester. So a lot of what we're talking about here are new faculty members who don't actually start work until the week of accountability, and all of that's catching up. And sometimes we are making those job offers as classes are filling at the beginning of a semester. So that obviously makes things worse than they would even normally be. So, we'll continue to engage with, faculty leadership and HR and IT to find ways to smooth those processes. I mean, we know it's an issue, but at this point, the best thing we can do is encourage kind of early decisions and, as much stability in terms of staffing and assignments as we can.
Excellent. This comes from a faculty member here. Again, back to the budgets. Historically, budgets spend down, which often have to occur quickly towards the end of a fiscal year and become a mad rush to figure out how to spend money quickly. This rush is often reactive, leading to rushed projects, which sometimes lead to budget liabilities for the next year to ensure these projects are successful or can be considered wasteful. How can we forecast our end of the year budgets moving forward to help us be proactive and give departments more time to have more successful projects?
So that's a fantastic question, and that's kind of the central problem that I'm hoping to try to solve here when it comes to finance. Um, Part of it is business model. Like there's a certain amount of regulations around finance and how we do things where there's a cyclical nature and we have to make those decisions. So in our context, we are given a certain amount of recurring budget every year, and that adjusts based on enrollment and whatnot. But during the year, the money we have is the money we have. So we want to maximize the amount of impact we can have on our students during that period of time. So what we are really talking about here is how to optimize so that we know that we're putting things towards our highest and best use as early as possible. Now, when we talked a little bit earlier about contingency funds and the fact that there aren't like big central stores of college money, really most of the college resources are tied up in our human capital, our employees, as well as the individual departments that all have line item budgets for whatever their plans were. And the money that is available at the end of the year for carrying forward for other purposes according to district policy or for year-end spending type initiatives are really things that were budgeted for other purposes that didn't fully pan out. So the best way to do anything about that, to get that money available a little bit earlier, is to have really clear conversations with our department managers to kind of tighten up what departmental budgets look like so that we have really firm plans. And then we work with those folks during the year when those plans change. Because my office cannot help to release funds to spend on other purposes until we know that the original purpose isn't going to be fulfilled for whatever reason. So this is a natural life cycle. This is a natural part of how a college runs. So we just need to get a little bit better about having that information be clearer earlier. So that's really the focus of a lot of our work moving forward, and a lot of AVP Mary Dreesen's work is going to be engaging with our faculty chairs, engaging with our managers to build a place where they have clarity about what's going on financially so that we can also have clarity about what's going on and can make those decisions earlier. Well, one other piece that I'll add is that while it's great to have some initiatives teed up, so when we do our budget and planning processes each year, part of that process is to get ideas from departments about new initiatives and things they want to try. We try to use that feedback to drive some of those year-end opportunities when funds are available, because we want to get those dollars into the hands of people doing the teaching and learning as much as possible. But there are natural restraints to what you can do and what types of things you can do before the end of the year. So really, we are trying to focus on getting some of those decisions made earlier in the process so that there's more money to go around. And part of it is to use really intentionally those year-end opportunities for things that we don't fully budget. So a lot of what we're spending money on these days are focused on catching up with infrastructure. So we're talking about updating furniture. We're talking about new carpet. We're talking about the 5,000 previously quite aged computers that are around campus. Having the opportunity to update those when we don't have a system of routinely budgeting them over the last several years. So I think we've been really successful over the last couple of years using whatever sort of naturally available funds through otherwise tumultuous, operating years to make a real impact on things that matter, even if they're not the things that are, directly in the programs.
Thank you. Covered several of our questions there in one shot. But one of the questions here I really like is, hey, any news on something exciting that you're funding currently or in the future?
Oh, goodness. So, I mean, the things that are, I think, the most interesting are back to that space of HERF. I mean, that's occupying a lot of our conversation right now, is that, again, when we talk about big picture budgets, we are trying to optimize. We're trying to find ways to focus on what's most important. But HERF is giving us an opportunity to try new things. So, I mean, that question goes back to, I think, a lot of interesting things that are happening across academic and student affairs in terms of pushing the envelope, trying new things. That's, upskilling some of our faculty. That's trying new models of supporting students with, technology and additional tutoring. And there's all kinds of interesting things going on. And, I personally find the things most interesting where we're pushing the envelope a little bit on how we deliver and trying something that truly is new, because I think in our line of work, we always have to be cognizant of the people that we are currently missing in the way that we're doing things. And I think, COVID funding in particular, and really all of the conversations around that, HERF aside, the conversations about how we're navigating COVID are interesting because it's pushing us into spaces that we haven't been, which allows us to see who we were not talking to that we should be.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you very much. So how do you think about investing in, how does the low enrollment impact our ability to fund new programs, new positions, new innovation? Do we stall with that, or do we have enough resources to keep moving education forward during a low enrollment year?
I think that's a really good question, and I think the answer is both of those things. So, like we talked about earlier, we definitely have to be cautious and thoughtful about how we're moving forward and what our sort of relative priorities are, given everything that's going on. But a pretty traditional and conservative response to a situation like this would be to cut back, to freeze things, to hold on, and not make investments because we need to hold on to what we have. And personally, I would like to continue to see us pushing that envelope a little bit and not stepping away from opportunities, because some of those opportunities might actually be the thing that help us to get out of whatever pickle we're in at any point in time. So it has to be a reasoned approach. It has to be, thoughtful in that regard. And I think it needs to keep options open. But in times when we can't make the same kinds of permanent investments and we're trying to create flexibility, I think those are also times when we have the ability to take targeted risks and make good decisions there. Now, there's a little bit of kind of cultural change that needs to happen as part of that as well, because once we get resources to do something, we like to try to do it forever and have that be a thing. And I think we're in an environment now where we continue to have a lot of opportunities to try and do new things, but we need to continue to approach our work through a test and iterate type environment rather than an invest once and keep it forever, because there's so many more things are fluid than we are used to in Maricopa.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you, sir. I know our listeners are really going to appreciate your being here and talking with us. I think so many layers. We could go on and on. I still want all of our colleges to be a place of destination for students, for scholars. I think we offer exciting and unique programs in ways that, Maricopa, when I've been here 21 or 22 years. And, when I first came here, man, I mean, we were 20,000, 22,000. This place was so robust, and I think we can get that back. I think we have the talent, we have the will, we have in the real estate market, they say location, location, location. I think we have a lot of that going for us. And I do think face-to-face classes will return. I think humans want that kind of interaction. Online can be efficient for many, many reasons. Like I say, distant learning has always been a part of higher learning. But I think students still want to come and socialize with their peers and learn, and have the real college experience. I think you see that at universities all across the country. Kids want to be back and sit in a classroom and argue philosophy and economics and politics. And that's how we learn, So I'm pretty confident that folks will come back. And when they do come back, we want to be ready for them. We want to have state of the art. Everything is our students and our community deserve the best. I want to thank you for being here, Brad. I think you're doing an exceptional job running all the different colleges and departments that you do. And I know our community really thanks you for doing the work that you do. At the end of our podcast, we like to give our guests an opportunity for some final words to talk to the community. Anything you'd like to say?
Well, I'll just thank you again for the opportunity to be here. This has been a good conversation, and I appreciate everything that you and Keegan are doing for the podcast and for keeping dialogue open here at MCC.
Thank you. Yeah, Keegan is a remarkable, I had this conversation last week with folks that want to keep talking about the system and the system and the system. And I keep reminding him the system is people. We're not objects, and it can feel like that sometimes. In fact, every once in a while I think about getting a mechanic shirt that says Eddie on it. It's like, we're more than employees. We're family, and people like Keegan have built stuff and devoted. It's always good to appreciate, and I know you do, and I know everybody does. It's always good to recognize that. In my dad's language, they say, "Dona dokohoi hawa hawa." Take care of each other out there. We're all we have. We'll see you soon.